July 22nd, 2006, item number 157. Today's very special guest is Leo Laporte.
Podcast411.com. Listen different.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Rob, and this is the Podcast 411 podcast. Before we get into the interview with Leo, a couple of very quick news and notes. First, happy 38th birthday to my brother Michael, who is one of New York City's finest. Second, as always, if you'd like to get a hold of us, you can give us a call at 206-666-HELP. That's 206-666-4357. Or you can send audio feedback to podcast411@gmail.com. And finally, you can go to podcast411.com and click on the My Chingo button and leave us audio feedback that way. And speaking of our website, I've added a couple new features. First, on the main page, I now have a list of the top 10 most recent forum board posts. So if you aren't using the forum board, I highly recommend you do. It's a good way to promote your show and let people know about your latest show and have it show up on the front page of the website. And of course, if you have questions, technical, whether they be newbie or really advanced, the forum board is a great place to get those questions answered in a non-hostile environment. Again, that's at podcast411.com. And then also I added a new page for all you podcasting fanatics like myself, which is a dashboard essentially of all the different forum boards for podcasting. So you can see the last 10 posts from Podcast 411, Podcast Alley, Podcasting News, Podcast Pickle, Apple, and Yahoo, all on one page. And it just makes it easier to track what's going on in the forum boards in the podcasting world. So check out that page. Let me know what you think. I created it for me, really, just because it was helping me save time, and I thought you guys might like it also. If you haven't done so already, head over to the oneamericacommittee.com website, or just do a search for Senator Edwards in iTunes. His latest show, episode 22, he interviews and has as a guest former President Jimmy Carter. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time that a former U.S. president is a guest of a pure play podcast. In other words, not something that was rehashed or created for some other media, but came on a show specifically to be a guest on a podcast. Really great conversation between the two. Highly recommend it. Again, search either in iTunes for Senator Edwards or go to oneamericacommittee.com. We're going to go now and get into the interview. Today's interview is much longer than I normally go on the interviews. Typically, the interviews run 18 to 20 minutes of content. Today's interview is at 57 minutes, so yeah, it's a wee bit longer. So if you're a first-timer and you like shorter shows, go check out the rest of my past shows. They're much shorter. But today's interview, we talked for about an hour and a half, and I edited it down to 56 minutes. I just couldn't take any more out. I mean, for some deity's sake that doesn't offend said worshippers of said deity, this is Leo Laporte, and I mean, I just could not pull out any additional information from what's already been pulled out. Without further ado, here's the interview with Leo Laporte. Leo, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And traditional first question here, and that is, what was your first computer?
My first computer was actually, it depends on whether you say my first computer at home or my first computer that I talked work into buying. The first computer I used regularly was when I talked the radio station I was working at into buying. It was a North Star Advantage, a CPM system that had, and boy, I managed to spend some money on their part. I talked them into getting a hard drive, a 5 megabyte, not gigabyte, kids.
No.
Megabyte.
That's
hard
the old
drive.
Was that the Winchester?
It was a Winchester. It was. I needed it because I wanted a C compiler, and the C compiler that came on it, you had to kind of compile yourself. You had to bootstrap it up. So it came with a very minimal compiler, and you had to build the whole thing up, all the libraries. You had to compile everything. So I think even the 5 megabyte hard drive was too small. And I did a lot of stuff on that databasing, and I did. It had vector graphics, even though it was CPM. But at home, I got an Atari 400. This was probably 79.
No.
And because I was into video games, and that really was the computer that really set me off.
I had my Atari 800. It was my second computer, but it was really my first computer. It was the one of my first love.
Great computer.
I still have it. It still works.
You do? Do you have Star Raiders? Do you have the Star Raiders cartridge?
Yes, I do. Yes. and it still works. And I have an Atari 400 that I picked
So
up
jealous.
for $50. I have the Atari 400 because the insides of the 400 are identical to the 800.
Well, that's right. It was just it had a membrane keyboard. So that, in fact, I got an 800 shortly thereafter because I said I want a real keyboard. But it's the same machine.
Right. I used to work at a computer repair center, and it was the Atari authorized one for Long Island. I got to work on a lot of those machines, and inside, identically the same, all the same components. So,
I spent so much money on that thing. So it comes with 48K of RAM. But I ended up, and no floppy. It came with a cassette adapter, and then you had to buy the cassette and play the games off of cassette. Or you could, when I would write basic programs, you save them onto cassette. It goes off to the cassette. It saves it as audio, which it then plays back. And it's very, very unlikely that it was going to get anything back, but I guess it kind of worked. And then I went out and bought floppy disk drive for it. In fact, I got a special floppy disk drive that allowed you to steal software.
Oh, you got the one with the special mod with the little...
Yeah, you remember that?
Yeah, the guy was from Long Island, and those things...
It was a lot faster, too.
Yeah, I forget his name, but we used to work with him. We used to work with him because he would come in, the guy that made those mods, and you could copy anything with it.
It was so great.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so great. That's really when I started as a computer journalist, even then, because I couldn't afford to buy all the software I wanted, so I started writing game reviews, software reviews. I wrote for some small Atari-only magazines, started writing a column for one of them, wrote some for Byte as well, which was the premier magazine at the time in computers. So that was really how I got started as a computer journalist. I was a DJ at the time, but I knew I fell in love. I mean, this thing was great.
Now, did you ever hear of a video game called Captain Beebles?
No, I don't remember.
Oh, that was the one that was the most addicted to.
Oh, I'm going to have to download an emulator.
Yeah,
try. I was a minor 2049er fan. That was my game.
Yep.
In fact, I just read that was Jack Black's favorite game when he was a kid. He played it on the ColecoVision, but he loved that game too. So we have something in common besides our girth and our great wrestling prowess.
I mentioned to you when we met at the expo that I was a big Screensavers watcher every night.
You're the one. I knew I met somebody who liked that show.
I have a big C-band 10-foot dish, and they call them buds, the big ugly dishes. And I got that, and so I was there the first season when you guys started up, you and Kate. I still love watching you guys, and I remember that was before you changed the intro. I think that was before the jumping over the car, or was the car the first season and you changed it? I forget.
The very first intro we did, I'll never forget. But it was before the channel even launched. Kate and I, it was a kind of a crime scene where she's like going up the ladder and with the pigeons run away on the pier, and I'm sitting on the bench and I look around real quick and she's got the phone in her hand and she looks around real quick and says, "Leo, Kate." That was the first one we did. We jumped off. I do remember a lot of jumping because my feet were killing me after that day. We jumped off of a lot of things. I remember climbing up ladders. It was so much fun, and this was before the channel launched. We spent a lot of time doing that, and it was I think it was one of the very first. We did a lot of rehearsals and pilots and tests and stuff, but that was the first time I think we really thought, oh, this might be interesting.
Now, if I remember right, like John Dvorak would come on after you guys.
Yeah, he had a show called Silicon Spin.
Yep.
Which is pretty much what Cranky Geeks is now. His video podcast. It's funny because John and I worked for CNET in the very earliest days of CNET when it was just a few people. And at the time, when CNET first started, it was supposed to be a television network. I don't think the web was really very big at the time. This was like 93 or 94. So they weren't thinking about a website. They were thinking about TV. They wanted to do tech TV. And they hired me as their VP programming for 2 weeks. And the one thing I did before they fired me was we made a pilot. And the pilot was essentially Silicon Spin. The difference was I hosted it. It was Dvorak, a guy named Fred Davis, a woman named Gina Smith, who later went on to be ABC's technology correspondent, and just finished the Steve Wozniak's autobiography. She worked with him on that. And Stuart Alsop, who was a very well-known tech journalist at InfoWorld. And it was basically Silicon Spin. So John and I have been doing that same show. And Twit is essentially Silicon Spin. So John and I have been doing that same show for, 15 years almost.
On the podcasting side, I know this is a change of subject, but here, I want to find out, what was the first podcast you listened to?
Oh, that's it. Probably Adam. Probably a Daily Source Code. And I think it was mostly because I wanted to find out what the heck it was. I remember It was in October 2004. I've always had audio on the net. In fact, the radio show that I do at KFI was on the net from day one. But I didn't know about podcasting, never heard of podcasting. And a kid called me. Oh, what's his? I can never remember his name. I wish I could, because he's a podcast pioneer as well. He was 14, I think, or 15. And he said, "Why don't you podcast it?" I said, "What's that?" And he told me. And so I think probably at that time, I went and listened to what I think was at the time the only podcast out there, certainly one of the few, which was Daily Source Code. And I said, "Oh, okay." Since then, I've listened to a lot of podcasts, although not. I think this is true of many podcasters, not as many as some people. I mean, I'm too busy making podcasts.
Well, okay. You have a lot of podcasts. And we're going to talk about
many.
Yeah, we'll talk about those in a second. But let's say, other than the Twit TV podcasts and the offshoots of Twit, what are some of the ones that you do listen to?
It's not a consistent list, believe it or not. I listen to yours, of course, and actually many of the people you've interviewed, I listen to their podcasts. I like Don and Drew. There's so many great podcasts out there. Adam's Maccast, of course, is a great podcast. I don't have time to listen to any on a consistent basis. So I love Ask a Ninja.
It's so funny, and you guys had a great interview with him.
He was wonderful, or they were actually. They were wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, they do such a good job. I mean, here's a funny story. I don't. My son, just 3 months old. The first thing he ever watched is Ask a Ninja.
Well, there you go. That's his generation.
I was sitting here at the computer watching Ask a Ninja, and he turned around and he started looking at it, and I turned him to it, and he sat there and watched the entire episode of Ask a Ninja.
Compelling content. There you go.
Even a 3-month-old can enjoy it.
I listen to Dignation, of course. I love Rocket Boom and Geek Brief. I listen to a lot of different ones, but I listen to a number of Buddhist podcasts, believe it or not. I don't listen to a lot of tech podcasts. So Buzz Out Loud, I like that. Molly's podcast. Alan Watts, his son, is putting a lot of his talks up on the net, and I'm a big fan of Alan Watts, so I listen to that. If I do listen to tech podcasts, it's usually the more technical ones, the Ruby on Rails or the Perl podcasts or stuff like that.
Do you listen to any music podcasts?
It's funny. If I listen to music, I listen to my own music on my iPod. I rarely listen to music radio or to a music podcast. Although, I love Coverville. I mean, that's a great podcast.
Brian does a great job.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, I'm not going to come up with anything that people who listen to you are going to go, "Oh, wow, I've got to go out and listen to that." They know all the podcasts out there. They could tell me what to listen to, not vice versa. I think that's not unusual. I mean, I don't watch much TV either. When I was doing TV shows, I very rarely watch TV. If you're busy doing it, it's often the case you don't have time to watch other people's stuff or listen.
Do you even get a chance to listen to most of the shows in your network?
Oh, I never listen to my own shows, no. I mean, I listen to them while I'm doing them, and I listen to them when I'm editing them. Although, unlike you, I don't do a lot of editing. In fact, sometimes I frequently do not listen to the whole show. I'll hear the beginning and the end. I'm looking for where to start it, where to end it, and then I take notes as we're going. So if somebody drops the F-bomb or something, I know. Although sometimes I miss it, but I generally kind of try to keep notes about where there's an issue. But I often don't even hear the whole show as I'm producing it. Believe it or not.
You have, I think it's 11 shows now in the Twit TV?
Something like that, yeah. I mean, it depends. Some of them I don't produce. If you go to twit.tv, let me count them. I don't even know. I have, in the directory, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But Mac Break and This Week in Media are really not my productions. They're Pixel Corp productions. So if it were just ones that I'm on that I produce, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got a couple more in the works.
That's what I was going to ask you. I know you just introduced Futures in Biotech, which is the latest one.
Yeah, that's the new one. Yep.
What do you have in the works? Can you talk about him at all?
A little bit. We're going to do a Mac Break audio podcast, so there'll be another Mac. This is what the world needs, another Mac podcast. I was talking to Adam Christensen last night. I said, Adam, I'm not competing against you. I just want you to know. But you know what's great about the podcast community? I'm very competitive. I would go, how dare you? When Kevin started Dignation, I said, how dare you? You're competing with us. Your own show. But I've learned we're not in competition. In fact, the more in a category, the better in a lot of ways. There's no real competition. So, but I told him, I said, Adam, I just want you to know, don't feel bad. I'm not going after you. But this was Alex's idea. We're going to do, Dvorak wants to bring back triangulation. Actually, the audience really wants it. It's a podcast we did one pilot of.
Back in December, right?
Yeah, the idea was, and I think it was John's idea, brilliant idea, is get an expert or two, preferably two with opposing viewpoints, and then the idea is get them together not to create heat, but to create light. So, you see a lot of these shows on CNN or Fox where people are fighting, and that doesn't really create more information or help anybody decide anything. So we thought we'd just get them together, have a good moderator, get these two guys and really elucidate, net neutrality or, patent law, that kind of thing. So the first one we did was Larry Lessig. We were talking about Google Print, and I thought it was very good, very entertaining. The problem has been that John's schedule and my schedule is tough, and the way I do my podcasts really is I expect the other guy to do all the work. So since John wasn't doing anything, nothing really happened. He didn't understand that was his job. He's got to get the guests. Amber and Steve, they do the, they get the guests. They do the legwork. They're the producer of the podcast in the content side. I produce it in the audio side and co-host it with them. And it's the only way I could do it. I couldn't do 7 if I had to book guests for 7 podcasts. So that's why I kind of stagnated. So John called me the other day and said, I really want to do this. What is it? What do we got to your schedule? I can't get a hold of you. And I said, well, he said, I'm just going to do it myself. I said, okay, that's fine. Sure, of course. Be my guest. So I'm going to send him some equipment, and we'll see. but I mean, now it's very clear it's up to him to do it. So, but I love the idea, and I'd love to do it. And maybe I can, if he doesn't take off with it, I'll get it going again. And then we really are looking at, we need to do a Windows podcast. I want to do a Countdown to Vista podcast, one that really focuses on Windows Vista. And then there's some other things I have ideas for, but I don't know if I have the stamina to do. I don't know. So I'm really at the limit of what I can do right now.
This is a question I have here, so I might as well ask it at this point. It kind of fits. How much time do you spend podcasting and researching for podcasts during a week?
A lot. Almost all my time. So it worked. It's just, it's all just kismet. It's all serendipity. What happened was my paying jobs weren't keeping me that busy. I go to Canada 5 days a month, to do Call for Help. And I do a radio show on the weekends, and that's my paying gigs, which meant that I had 3 weeks with nothing to do. And that's what had happened is the podcast filled the void. Some intelligent person would have just said, great, I can put my feet up and relax. But no, not me. So really the podcasts have filled the time. So if you do the math, I basically do, it's a full-time job 3 weeks out of the month. So it's at least 120 hours a month. It's probably more. It's probably more like 150 hours a month working on these.
When you're doing Twit, prep-wise, before you guys get together, do you meet like a couple days before and say we're going to go over these subjects? Or do you send an email and say here's what we're going to talk about? Or is it just it goes?
It's pretty offhand. In order to do this many podcasts, they have to be as unprepared as possible. So the way Twit is, by the way, the podcast I put the most work into, because unlike the other ones, the other guys don't do anything on Twit. I'm the Amber MacArthur of Twit, or the Steve Gibson of Twit. I do the work. So I set up the way it works. We have a Delicious account. For a while, I was sending out emails every week, but we have a Delicious account now, and I will through the week add links to stories I think we should talk about. Interesting stories. And then I have somebody who started. This guy is a British guy, Fred F. Not his real name, but this one he goes by, who started flooding me with emails. I get like 10 emails a day from him. You should cover this. You should cover this. You should cover. So finally, I gave him the password to the Delicious account. I said, "Dude, just upload him to Delicious." So he's and it's actually really useful because he does it. And then we also have a Twit Army Delicious account, which anybody can use to post to. I think it's Twit Army is the name of the account. I think the password is Twit. I look at that too. So, and what I want to do at some point is create a page or some way that people can, a form that people can submit stories. But so anyway, the stories get picked somehow. And then it's the Twit's job to read those stories. They're all tagged with the number of the show episodes. So 63 is coming up as we talk. So they can go to del.icio.us you could do this too, /twit/63, and that'll be the stories that we're working. And so generally their responsibility is to read up. The other thing that I do is send out a pleading email every Friday saying, please be on the show on Sunday, please, please, please. And then most people ignore it. Usually only David Prager ever responds to me. Maybe Robert Heron, Roger Chang, a few people. Dvorak never does, Patrick never does, Kevin never does. And then we turn on Skype at 3 on Sunday afternoon and just hope somebody shows up. There was an occasion where no one showed up, and we just didn't do it that week. In fact, it was actually kind of depressing. I almost hung myself. We had a television studio booked. We had a camera crew. We were all ready. Everybody had said they were going to be there.
Oh, wow.
And I got emails from, just independently by chance, from all of them an hour before saying, can't make it. So I had to actually call down to the crew and say, go home. We're not going to do Twit this week. But most of the time it works out pretty well. And if we ever make any money and I can start paying people, I think it'll be, Now, actually, it's an embarrassment of riches. I've expanded the crew a little bit to include some other people like Will Harris from Great Britain from bit-tech.net, and who's great. Bill McCrone from formerly PC Magazine, and actually still at PC Magazine. And so by expanding the roster a little bit, I've actually now got an embarrassment of riches. I usually have too many people. I really only want to do 5 people total, including myself.
And you're limited to how many people you can get on Skype that sound good.
Yeah, although now we could do 99, but it sound good. That was the underline that, yeah. So it seems to be, I don't know what your experience has been, but it seems to be 5 is kind of the max.
I find that's right where I see it, 5. And matter of fact, once you get 3 or more, if you get 2 people talking, you start getting that artifact coming. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. And, we're really tied to Skype. None of this could have happened without Skype. Every one of my podcasts is produced on Skype.
Yeah, I still don't understand why some people are out there pushing the boxes, the hybrids, and I'm like, why? Why not just use Skype? And
right. Well, someday somebody's going to come along. I don't know why Skype hasn't done this. Maybe they just didn't. Maybe they haven't talked to any podcasters. But it could be a lot better. I mean, it could have local recording built into it. It could have, you can right now, if you record in GarageBand and use iChat, each voice is a separate channel.
Yeah, but it crashes.
Right, and it doesn't sound so good. But that's what we need. We need something like that.
Yeah.
And if somebody came along with that, because right now, the mix is 2 channels, me and everybody else.
Yeah.
So I don't have a whole lot of control. And that's why the times when Twit has crashed and burned, and it has a few times, have almost always been technical issues. People couldn't hear each other, or they were talking over each other because of the lag and stuff like that.
I'll change the subject a little bit here. On past show, you mentioned a little bit, I think it was the last Twit, you mentioned the Nielsen's made some comparison about blog creators to podcast listeners. And I just want to say this. Isn't that kind of like comparing back in the 50s or 60s newspaper writers to people watching television?
Yeah, exactly. It's not a legit comparison.
Now,
you're right.
Nielsen's today did come out with some new stats that I thought were pretty interesting. They said 60% of listeners always fast forward through commercials.
Wow. Please don't spread that around.
67% for female listeners.
Now, I'll tell you something. That is really hard to say, because I would agree if they're interstitials, if they're traditional commercials, right, where, all of a sudden, let's pause for this word, and you have a recorded commercial, I would fast forward through that and do. On the other hand, I don't think that's how podcast advertising is going to play out. I think you'll get much more value as an advertiser if you advertise on a podcast where the audience is really interested in your product, and they have a good rapport with the podcaster, and the podcaster himself does the commercials. I mean, that's how I do my commercials on my radio show. It's an old-fashioned way of doing it, but it really works, and that's how we do it on Twit. We all of our ads are kind of really part of the content, and as much as I can make them part of the content, I do.
You had mentioned 2 shows ago that the next show you were going to have an advertisement for Dell. I listened to the episit at the end.
Didn't happen.
I was I didn't hear the Dell ad.
Yeah,
where was the ad?
Isn't that great?
I was like, wow. It was so good, I missed it.
You didn't have to fast forward. No, I screwed up.
Okay.
We're on the verge of a Dell campaign. Okay. But the Dell legal, there's 2 layers of legal that we have to get through, and the real issue with now I'm speaking to podcasters. I know a lot of podcasters listen to Podcast 411. So the real issue with advertising and podcasts is that agencies and companies are really uncomfortable with user-created media. They're afraid of it, and they don't know exactly what they're going to get. You know, when you buy an ad on KFI, even if I'm doing the ad, you know it's going to be an ad, and it's going to be in this environment. It's going to be in a commercial radio environment. You know what you're getting. But when you buy a podcast, do you know what you're getting? Not really. So there's a lot, the comfort level of agencies, I think, it's particularly agencies. We haven't had that problem. We have an advertiser on Security Now, which is not an agency buy. It's a security company. They get the product. They get Security Now. They get Steve. They get me. They know that's where they want to be. They're very comfortable with that environment. But somebody like Dell, who's used to advertising on mainstream media, they need a lot of reassurance. They need a lot of hand-holding, and the podcasters. It's been a lot of work for me. We have to really work with them. And that's fine. I mean, I understand why they're nervous. Now, I think that's because it's a new medium. I don't think it's going to be that way in a couple of years. In fact, in a couple of years, I think that agencies and advertisers are going to be beating down our doors.
Yeah, I agree. Right now, the advertisers I've talked with, they come and ask me, what are some good podcasts and this and that, and they're like, and then I explain to them, these aren't FCC safe, and they're like, what? I go, yeah, some of these shows make Howard Stern look timid. And they're like,
oh, that scares the heck out of them. It's the same problem MySpace has. MySpace is not getting a premium dollar for their ads because you don't know. Procter & Gamble's not going to buy MySpace. You don't know where your Downy ad's going to end up. It's a process. There will be, and I certainly endeavor to make all of my podcasts, FCC, if you want to call it FCC safe. They're certainly all clean, and they're family friendly. But they're also, not because I want to make them a good environment for advertising. That's not my goal by any means. I come from mainstream media, and that's just kind of my bent. I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. Yeah. I'm not out to shock anybody. But I think that there are plenty of advertisers. I mean, look at Trojan got a lot of mileage out of Dawn and Drew. That was a good fit. And kudos, bully to Trojan for seeing that, But most agencies and most advertisers are more conservative than that.
Yeah, well, what I say to podcasters is that, they'll say to me, Tim Henson from Distorted View, which is probably the most out there podcast. He's like, who would advertise on my show? I go, pick up Penthouse. Whoever advertises in there would advertise on your show.
What's going to really is going to increase everybody's comfort level. Agencies want to be comfortable right up to the point where it's costing them money not to advertise on podcasts. And the minute people's, podcast advertising works, is effective, they realize how effective it is, all of the concerns are going to go away. The concerns only occur because right now they can safely ignore podcasting. It's not going to be that way for much longer. Well, the irony is, I make my living in television. And I'm best known for television. And that's one of the reasons I do some video, because that audience really says, where's your TV show? But from the point of view of a sole proprietor, sole producer, audio is just count the ways. It's a lot easier to produce. It's a lot cheaper. The bandwidth costs are much lower. And I think this is what gets overlooked. Advertisers want video, the mainstream media wants video. Video is sexy because everybody thinks in the terms of radio versus TV. What they forget is that the natural niche for podcasting is people stuck in their cars, working out in the gym, working in the garden, people who can't watch TV, can't read the internet. They need an audio program. And that's a very big and growing audience. And I think an audience that podcasting serves beautifully. So I am very comfortable. In fact, I would love it if all the mainstream media attention and all this goes away, goes over to what's next in vlogging? Fine. Go pay attention to that stuff. I'm going to stay right here where I am, which is a good, great, long-term viable business. I don't have any desire to do the sexier thing. I remember very well Harvey Mackay, who wrote a classic business book about 15 years ago called Swim with the Sharks. He made his money making envelopes. And he said, there's a lot to be said for being in an unsexy, out-of-the-way business. Some of the most successful businesses in the world don't get reported about in the Wall Street Journal or Business Week because they're not sexy. But if there's a need that you're filling, you can do very, very well. And I think that that's really true. I don't crave the spotlight by any means.
And another comment, too, about the video and people in the car. If they do try to watch video during the drive, usually that causes your audience to have like a churn.
Yes, there's a natural Darwinian response.
Yeah.
Natural selection favors audio podcasts. I think you've hit on something, Rob. No, you're exactly right. It's funny because we're also driven by that's the shiny new thing. And bloggers probably are feeling right now a little bit of jealousy over podcasting because they were the flavor of the month for a while. And now podcasters come along. And I've noticed there's a little bit of jealousy from bloggers. Don't worry about it. It's actually good when the spotlight moves off of you. I would say the same spirit motivates bloggers or podcasters that motivates bloggers, many podcasters, not all, but many. But I don't think, it might have been true early on, but I don't think in the long run that there's a very strong correlation between people who blog and people who podcast. It's a different medium. Any more than, as you said, between magazine writers and television hosts. It's a different medium, and it's similar in the respect that it's a fundamental revolution in user-generated content. And in that respect, they're absolutely blood relatives. And there's a lot of other things, YouTube, mashups, all that stuff. All of those are cousins in that regard. But I think podcasts and podcasters are very different than blogging. This isn't like a blog. I mean, Podcast 411 isn't a blog.
Oh, no, not at all. No.
And none of what you hear on this show would make any sense on a blog. Yeah. And any more than me reading my blog on a podcast would make any sense.
There are some podcasts that are audio blogs. That's for
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah, KimiCast, Dan Class, Bitter's Pill, definitely are. Dan is also a comedy podcast, but it's definitely.
See, that's the thing, and he has delivery. Mm-hmm. And in a way, it's a blog in the sense of the kinds of things he talks about, but he also is a comedian. He has delivery. He has style. And that's an audio thing that doesn't, there's a difference in writing style and spoken style. I think maybe a lot of bloggers who thought they would make the move to podcasting were a little disappointed. It's not the same medium.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference. And some people do podcasting that never did blogging because they don't like to write. They feel more comfortable behind the mic.
I hate writing. If it came down to speaking for a living or writing for a living, I would starve if I had to write.
Well, speaking of that, how many books have you written?
I don't even know. But I don't write them anymore. Now it's more like editing them and guiding them. I have very good people who are much better writers than I am. I practically killed myself writing these books. We do about 4 or 5 a year. Okay. And I'll be honest with you, the quality is better now that I'm no longer writing them. These guys, we have wonderful writers who really know their stuff. They know me, they know how I feel about stuff. They write in my voice. They reflect my point of view very, very well, but they do a much better job of it.
I'll tell you, writing the book for me, that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, it's death. And you had a co-author.
Yeah.
It's death. Try doing it all by yourself.
Oh, forget it, Alan.
No, writing is so painful for me. But see, that's good. We're in a medium we should be in.
Now, I am lucky I was with Q, which I know you're with Q also.
Sure,
and they treated
your editor over there?
My editor was Todd Green, and then it halfway through, the acquisition editor switched over to Michelle Newcomb, but the development editor was Todd Breakey.
Right. That often happens, right, yeah. I have a wonderful editor, Rick Cugin, who's done a fantastic job, and he's a long-suffering guy. And I think one of the reasons that we finally decided to have co-authors is he got tired of waiting for me as deadline after deadline passed and nothing.
We hit every deadline, except for the first one, which we missed by 5 days, but that was...
I'm impressed.
Yeah. But they threw the first deadline on us with like 21 days, and they're like...
Well, that's what they always do. It drives me crazy. They wait till the last minute. They say, okay, go.
Yeah. It's like, what? No!
Write a book. How quick can you write a book?
Oh, on a recent show, I have some ideas here for you. You were talking about This Week in Law and wondering who you could get. Here's 2 perfect people for you. Denise Howell.
I love Denise. Yes, she's very good.
And Colette Vogel. And Colette I
don't know her.
Colette wrote the law guide for podcasting with the Berkman Center.
Oh yeah. So that's a great document. It's funny. I will never again mention that I am thinking about doing a particular kind of podcast, because I feel bad. I got dozens of emails from lawyers who said I'd be good for that, and they would be. I'm sure they would be. I just I don't know how to. I don't really want to audition. I don't know what to do. I mean, I think it's a great idea.
Well, they're both podcasters and bloggers,
I know Denise.
right?
Yeah. Denise is excellent. And I don't know Michelle, but I will. That's good advice.
Colette Vogel's the other one. Just look at she's the author of the law guide for podcasting,
which I have bookmarked because I constantly want to know where I'm going wrong. Where am I going to be sued?
One of the podcasts I haven't listened of your group is Security Now, because I'm all Mac, so I just figured I don't need it.
Oh, you might be wrong, my friend.
But now that I have the MacBook and I'm getting ready to put Parallels on, I guess I'm probably going to have to. The
thing about Security Now is it's not just Windows exploits. It really isn't. There's a lot of other stuff that we talk about. Anybody who is kind of, I think, first of all, you have to be kind of curious about security. So if you're the kind of person who has a Mac and you don't really want to know about this stuff, then fine. But I mean, we don't just talk about Windows exploits. We talk about how hackers work, how they do what they do. What is, for instance, we just started we're going to start next week in a 3-week series on virtualization, which is how Parallels works, and how virtualization can be used to protect yourself. We talk about how to use the hosts file, Macs have hosts file, to speed up internet access and to keep bad guys from getting on your system. And we talk about a lot of stuff that's applicable to a Mac user. So, I think a lot of Mac users feel like I don't have to ever worry. And it's not true. We all have security issues, believe me. Okay. Not the same kind.
Well, there goes another hour in my week.
No, you don't have to listen, honest. In fact, I'm really concerned. I'll be honest, I'm really concerned. I think that there is a phenomenon of burnout. I think one of the big problems is there are too many podcasts, and you can't listen to them all. And one of the reasons I'm reluctant to launch anymore is I feel like there's going to be a point of diminishing returns where you actually, worse than diminishing returns, you actually go negative because people are so burnt out. It's like I get the New York Times, the Sunday Times. I used to get the Daily Times, and I never read it because it was too much, and it made me feel guilty and bad, and I started to hate it. I really don't want to get in that situation. I think as podcasters, it's something we have to be aware of.
But there's FeedBurner's tracking 59,000 podcast feeds. Now, granted, a certain number of them are dead. Right, a certain number of them are dead, and certain are duplicates. But I always say, if you look at the FeedBurner number, it's probably representative of the community at large.
I mean, it doesn't include me, but there are a lot of people using it. I would say, who knows how many there are. Active podcasts, there's at least 20,000.
Right.
At least, probably more than that.
Here's what I found funny, was Nielsen was saying in their article that they were going to track podcasting, and they were going to do it with 400. They were going to start out with 400 people on their iPods. Now, if you have 400 people and you're trying to track the surveys of 50,000 or 20,000 stations, I'm thinking that those numbers become insignificant and meaningless.
Right.
I mean, 400 people and you're tracking 12 television stations in a market, that's fine. But 400 for 20,000,
No, it's an issue. And their methodology absolutely does not scale to podcasting. And anyway, if you think about it, the whole they've got to create special devices that the whole thing is nuts. The thing is, understand, we know more about our listeners than television knows anyway, because you have to download it from us. So we have a lot of information, much better information. And, it's funny because you hear agencies say things, well, all right, but they download them, but how many are listened to? Well, I don't know. How many shows that are TiVoed are watched? How many magazines that are subscribed to are read? How many newspapers are read? Can you tell me if you buy an ad in the newspaper that somebody's going to see that page? No.
Well, I tell them this. I go, over 85, actually 90% of my listeners, according to the stats I have, are listening on iTunes and subscribe to iTunes. And after 5 shows, if they don't listen, it stops downloading. So I know if my numbers aren't going down and they're staying steady or rising, that's at least 90% of my audience is listening.
That was something Apple really did right in that, and I think that helped us all a lot. Again, this is a case of agencies being uncomfortable with podcasting for a lot of reasons. Believe me, all of those considerations will go away soon. I mean, that's they can do that now because they have the luxury of ignoring podcasting, but they're not going to have that luxury much longer. We have better numbers than television has. Trust me. Nielsen ratings on TV is completely inaccurate. On Tech TV, unless you have millions of viewers, Nielsen ratings are useless. On Tech TV, where we had hundreds of thousands of viewers, it was about 5 people meters that gave us our ratings. So one guy goes on vacation, our ratings go down 20%. This is not an exaggeration. This is factual.
Oh.
So this is a bad methodology, and it doesn't work for TV, and it really won't work for podcasting, as you point out.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that. 400 people, and they're subscribing to 8 shows each, say.
That's it.
And so that doesn't even cover 20,000.
But remember, advertisers only want the top 100 podcasts anyway.
Right. So maybe those 400, of that, maybe there's 15 shows that they have more than 10 of them collectively are listening to.
I'll be honest with you.
I would be really crazy on stats.
It's not going to work, and Nielsen's not going to be able. I'm actually more worried about iTunes, frankly, because I think people do put a lot of stock in the top 25 on iTunes.
Well, they don't know how it works. Most people think it's the top 25 most subscribed to all time. They don't realize it's the most subscribed to in the last 7 days with a weighted average for the last 24 hours. And
right.
It's new subscriptions.
So it's completely worthless. Nevertheless, and this is where I really have a gripe, I'll be honest. Look, I know the guys who are at the iTunes division there and the podcasting division. They're great guys. They've been very supportive of us. But it's just bad for everyone, for any one company to have this much dominance. And when Apple does things like, as they have, they dropped off. Remember, at the top podcast, they used to have a selector that would at least let you say, well, what's the top technology podcast?
Well,
it's gone.
I talked on that, and he said it's coming back.
Yeah, he said that to me, too, 2 weeks ago. I sent him a note immediately.
So did I.
Saying, what the hell? You're killing me, guy. And he said, oh, yeah, it's an error, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know. It's been a while. It's been almost 4 weeks now. So but that's okay. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it's just a problem. But clearly you see they have too much weight. That just kills me. I have disappeared from iTunes from the point of view of somebody who doesn't know, and nobody knows it. I mean, how many people know what that today's top podcast?
Nobody.
Top 100. If you're not in the top 100, well, I guess nobody's listening to you. Yeah. I guarantee you, my podcasts are in the top 20 overall listened to, and I probably have 2 or 3 in the top 5. But that doesn't show up there, and as a result, to the outside world, I don't exist, and I think that's terrible.
Well, I think it's pretty much an agreement that yours, Ricky Gervais, and Ask a Ninja are the top 3 podcasts. I don't think there's anybody else close to you 3.
We're doing, and again, I know numbers. I understand are really screwy in the podcast world. And again, because I'm talking to podcasters a little bit, so we can talk here. And I'm going to talk about this at my keynote at Podcast Expo. I have numbers from AOL that say that something like 321,000 people downloaded Twit, and any Twit episode gets downloaded about 300,000 times in 1 month, which is a very big number.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, I don't know how accurate that number is, because there's all sorts of issues with uniques and caching, and I think I know Apple's doing something behind the scenes that I can't figure out what they're doing. They deny it, but I can tell there's something going on. I've talked to other podcasters about that. So even though we do have more numbers and better numbers, I think, than any other medium, there's still some issues about our numbers. So I would never say. I don't think anybody knows who the top podcasts are, and there may be a podcast nobody's ever heard of that's the number 1 podcast because Rush Limbaugh's podcast or whatever. The truth is, there are some issues. I'm just hoping that Google or Yahoo or somebody's going to it may be Microsoft, frankly, to step forward with a product that is as easy to use. I hate to see one company dominate this. They've done a great job. I'm not knocking them. Look, podcasting wouldn't be where it is today if it weren't for iTunes. It made it a mass medium.
Before iTunes came out, you couldn't get a lot of companies to even raise an eyebrow. But after it came out, those same companies,
Absolutely.
Then they're knocking on your door. Hey,
Yeah.
You mentioned this thing, podcasting, a few months ago. Can you come talk to us about it now?
I mean, some of that might have happened anyway. It's really hard to tell, but it certainly was a watershed event in podcasting. They wield a lot of power, and when they make a little mistake, like getting rid of that drop down, or it stops working, it hurts us all a lot.
Apple, please put the drop down back in, please.
And then there are a lot of podcasters, smaller podcasters, who will never show up on that list. Do they not exist? No, of course they exist. They're good. I mean, to Apple's credit, they have the editorial picks, and they do expose people to a lot of podcasts that aren't going to make it to the top 25. But how many thousands of podcasts will ever be featured in any way on iTunes compared to the tens of thousands that are out there?
Right. Well, and I wrote this in the book. I go, don't blame on malice what can be explained by lack of resources. And they don't have a lot of resources in the iTunes team.
And they're great guys, and I love them, and I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying what I've always said, and I'll say it all the time in technology in general. It's always bad when one company is dominant, whether it's Microsoft or Apple or so IBM. Diversity is key in any space like this.
You mentioned the Podcast Expo a second ago, or a few seconds ago. You just told me something before we got on. You want to explain?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to be keynoting again. I keynoted the first Podcast Expo. It's Tim Berkman who does it. The Podcast Brothers. It's so funny because the first one is a portable media expo, and he wasn't sure if podcasting was going to be a big enough thing to give it its own name and all that stuff. And by the time the show actually happened, podcasting was so big, there was no doubt this is the Podcast Expo. And I think it's still technically the Portable Media Expo, but it's Podcast Expo too. And I'm very flattered. Tim has asked me to come back and keynote, which is kind of unheard of. I mean, usually you keynote once and you're out. But I'm really looking forward to the opportunity. Last year, my talk was Podcast Your Passion. It was really a call to people to get out there and podcast, Don't worry about money. Don't worry about what people think. Just do it. Do it because you have something to say and because it's a fun thing to do. Now we're a little more mature, and I think some of the issues we've been talking about today are I'm going to talk about what's next for podcasting. What should be on the agenda for all of us as podcasters? What issues do we have to face together? And I think the number one thing that I've really realized is we're all in this together. We sink or swim together. It's not us, not me versus you, or it's all of us together. There is no competition between us. As competitive as a human as I am, I've come to realize that. So that's item number one. But I think there are a lot of things we as podcasters need to really push, and I'd like to just kind of set the agenda for the next year.
Well, I'm looking forward to that keynote.
It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. I think what we're going to do, and I'd love to have you on it, is we did Twit from Podcast Expo last year, and we'll do kind of a modified Twit this year. I want to talk to a lot of podcasters. I almost want to have a round table of podcasters and put it on the Twit network.
Count me in.
Yeah, please do. As really talking about the issues that podcasters are dealing with. Because, I know a lot of podcasts are about podcasting, but this is a brand new medium, and we're inventing it as we go along. And truthfully, there's very little distinction between the podcaster and the podcast listener. We're all in this together. So, you're all invited to participate. That's, I think, September 29th and 30th in Ontario. And if you go to podcastexpo.com.
And we'll be having a poker party. We'll be having a poker at nighttime.
Yeah?
So if you play poker.
I do. What night?
We may do both nights.
Friday night?
But, definitely we'll have Friday night and probably even Thursday night.
Good, because I have to get home Friday night, but I will be around Thursday night. Because Doug Kay's doing his Podcast Academy for the day before for people who want to learn about podcasting. I'm going to be speaking at that as well. So after that, I'd love to play poker.
Okay,
I'll stay up all night. That'll be fun.
Okay, I'll send
really
you
good
the info.
for my keynote.
Yeah, Gary at Podcast Pickle, he's got a suite, so we already set that up, and we're going to have a sponsor for the party and everything. So.
Oh wow!
Yes.
Oh, I'd love to be there for that.
Couple more things, and I'll let you go and get some food in you. One thing is, on your last show, and I have to comment on this. You mentioned Smell-O-Vision, and the movie they picked.
Yeah.
The movie they pick is New World. Okay. Bad idea to pick a period piece from before there was deodorant.
That's right. No bads.
Yeah. We're going to do a Smell-O-Vision movie. Let's pick it where they don't have deodorant. Okay, yeah.
God. Well, at least there's no gasoline or diesel fumes smell. Did they ever do that in the States? I think they only did it in Asia, and I hope they don't bring it here. I don't think it'll ever make it here.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I'm like, what? Why that movie?
You know what I really like about Twit, and I'm getting this from you, and I get it from a lot of listeners, is people I wish there was some way we could do this. Everybody really is a participant. You're talking back to the show. Everybody has a thought about what we're saying.
Have you thought of putting My Chingo up?
What's that? I don't know.
Okay.
My Chingo?
Okay, here's what My Chingo. It's a bad name, and he's going to have a different name too. But it's CINGO.
Audio comment system.
Right.
Okay.
And what you do is people from their computer can record it, and then it adds it in, and then you can make the messages public or private, and have the player, and then people can listen to listen to them. So I
would like to do that. That's a good idea. Of course, then there's a whole other bunch of moderating I'm going to have to do.
Well, to have Shuby do it.
Yeah, put Shuby to work. I use Odeo has a little similar talk record button. I use that on the radio show, and that's worked out pretty well actually. So yeah, I'll take a look at Chingo. That'd be the neat thing. Unlike Odeo, it's kind of private to me, but you can record a question or a comment. But this would allow others to listen, which is
right. You get to listen to it first, then you get to choose if you want to make it public or private or delete it, and so you have some moderation because
I'll do it.
It's a nice feature, and they can record up to 2 minutes for free, or you can pay so much money, and then they can go up to 30 minutes.
I'm going to do it. I'll sign up right away. I think it's a great idea. I love any kind of interactivity. I just think it's really neat. We're trying out this thing called InnerTube, which is kind of neat. I don't know if you played with that a little bit, but it's a way that you can, it's a flash player for a podcast, so you can listen. And then it's kind of got chapter headings, and then you can click on the chapter heading and then add a text comment to it. So it's a commenting system for audio, which is, I think, really interesting. We're seeing a lot of wonderful innovation, I think, right now on the net, and I just love seeing that. I will sign up for My Chingo. That sounds neat.
And by the way, congratulations on the new site. I like the look.
Do you like it?
Yeah.
Mostly the look is one where, that's an aesthetic judgment, but mostly I was looking for functionality. Because,
it's easy to get around too.
Yeah. I want you to be able to go to the site, see immediately what the different shows are, and listen to them. And that was the mission that Archetype was charged with, and Jeff MacArthur did a really good job, I think, of figuring out an information architecture that made it easy. And I think that's going to help the number of listeners, frankly. I think we'll get more listeners because they can find the shows and listen to them.
Yeah. My site desperately needs an overhaul, and that's something on my agenda.
Well, we're podcasters, not web designers.
I know.
As long as people can... and this is, frankly, in a way, this is defensive programming against iTunes, because we've got to have it's clear now. We can't rely... iTunes was crack for podcasters. We kind of relied on it. For people who were on the top 25, it was really addictive, right? I mean, that kept us going. And being on the top 25 kind of kept you on the top 25 for a long time. Twit was there just because it was there, right? Because people would subscribe to it because they saw it. So that was crack, and that was a bad thing. And I think we're getting back to the basics, which is we've got to promote it ourselves. We've got to have good websites that are very clear about what we're doing and make it easy for people to subscribe and easy for people to listen to. We've got to do word of mouth advertising. We've got to get our name out, guerrilla marketing. We cannot rely on iTunes, and that's been for a lot of the top podcasters. I think that's been a bad thing in some ways.
What are you seeing as a good way for podcasters to guerrilla market? I mean, what have you heard that you think is something that's different?
Well, remember how Derek and Swoopy got skepticality out there. They went to message boards, not of podcast listeners, or they went to people, astronomy sites, scientists, where people hung out who would listen to the podcast naturally, and they promoted it. There is no one way to do it. You have to think about who is your audience, where they congregate, and how to talk to them. I'll never forget hearing Pud, the guy who started Effed Company, how he promoted his website was very smart. He went to message boards, but instead of saying, "Oh, come see my site, it's a really good site," he would post messages saying, "Have you seen this site? This is the most god-awful site. This guy should be taken down. This is terrible." And of course, he drove a lot more traffic by doing that than by saying, "Come see my site." So that's what it means to be guerrilla marketer. It means being creative, thinking out of the box, and finding a way to create a buzz about your podcast. And I think every podcast is different, because every podcast has a different thrust, a different audience, different idea. Making a network, as Podcast Pickle has done, is one way to do it, or Pod Show. The problem is these networks get so big, you're no better off there than you would be, on iTunes. So it's hard to know, really. I'm in an unusual situation because I have a TV and a radio show, so I have kind of a natural promotional vehicle. And even then, I'm struggling. I mean, it's very hard for me. Our audience grows a little bit. Has been growing pretty steadily, but it's not growing as fast as I'd like it to grow. And I don't know exactly what I need to do. I don't think buying ads is the right thing either.
Well, to the 2 or 3 of my listeners that aren't subscribed to Twit, go and subscribe.
That's one way to do it. And same thing for Podcast 411. Absolutely. And of course, one of the things I like to do, and I always do when I do these, is, with your permission, I'd like to do it with you, is I have that Radio Leo feed that is not just my podcasts, but is also every appearance I make. And that's, I don't run promos for other podcasts in my podcast. I just don't want to clutter it up with that. But that's my way of kind of giving back, which is basically putting new podcasts on the feed so people who can hear it and hear it and maybe subscribe to it for future. So
absolutely, I'll send you.
That's okay with you?
Yeah, I'll send you the link from Libsyn. Yeah. I'll send you the tag.
That's all I need. What I do, I use this great software. You probably use it. Well, actually, you don't need to because you have Libsyn. I use Feeder from Reinvented Software.
Okay. Here's how geeky I am. I hand code my RSS feed.
Wow. Oh, try Feeder.
You know what? I actually like hand coding it because I edit it live on the site, and so all I have to do is just go in there, and I figure the information I'm changing, I was going to have to punch in anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's not that much harder.
Right.
No,
so I don't have to upload anything. So I just go in, I copy the last show, and then I make my edits. And
that makes sense.
Hit save and.
Well, one of the reasons I like Feeder is because what I can do is download your RSS, your master RSS, and that will show up in Feeder as a pod, as if I were creating it, and I can just take your item, this show's item, and drag it into Radio Leo, and it's done. Okay. So that's kind of handy. There are a few things GUIs are good for.
Last question, as always, and you've already given a bunch of this, but is there any other advice for podcasters that you'd like to get out there? Something that you just think they overlook all too often, other than compression.
Compression, that's good advice. I would say, on a higher level, my advice is hang in there. We are in on the birth of a brand new medium, and there are going to be struggles. There are going to be glitches. We're not going to make as much money as we think we ought to right away and things like that. But I do believe that we are involved in something that is really significant. I think it's more significant than blogs. I think it's a really important part of user-created content. And if you love what you're doing, do what you love, of course. If you're not loving it, don't do it. But if you have something to say and you love doing it in this format, in this medium, but you're getting discouraged maybe because the audience isn't growing as fast as you think it should, or you're not getting on iTunes or whatever, don't give up. Hang in there, because I think in the next... I'm not sure exactly how long it's going to take, but I think over the next 1 or 2 or 3 years, you're going to see a major explosion in podcasting. Not the number of podcasts, but in the amount of money available to podcasters, the acceptance we get, the credit we get. We are, in the long run, I think we're riding a rocket ship. So I guess my advice is hang in there.
Well, hang in there. I'm happy to hear that because I really respect your opinion. I've been in media for
30 years. I've been doing this a long time. I go way back in radio. I go way back in TV. And I've never seen anything like this. And I'm not alone. Dvorak feels the same way. You remember John wrote...
Oh, well, now you just ruined it.
Remember, John wrote a very nasty article about podcasting, which is his normal reaction to everything. But as he's seen it up close, being part of podcasting now, I think he says, I've seen a lot of things come and go. I know what's going to make it and what's not. And there's something going on here that you don't see very often in technology or even in the world. There's a new medium being born. It's really exciting.
One of the early questions when I first started the show, and I stopped asking because people didn't have an answer, used to be, what was the first bulletin board that you went to? And do you remember the first website you visited? And to me, when I started out in podcasting, it felt to me like back in the early 80s when I was on, going to Pirates Cove.
That's right.
And things like that. And
I ran a BBS, FidoNet BBS for several years in San Francisco called MacQ. And I totally agree with you. And in a way, this is sad because we were, it was very grassroots and it wasn't mainstream, but it does feel very much like it did the first time I saw the internet, the first time I realized how many people were online and how vast the world was. I mean, if you think bloggers are influential, you ain't seen nothing yet. I think podcasters in the long run are going to be more influential than anybody else. And remember, there's $20 billion in radio advertising a year. There's $80 billion in TV advertising. That money is going to be looking for somewhere very soon because they're not getting the results they want to get with television and radio. They are going to be looking for a better way to advertise. Billions and billions of dollars are going to be flowing into the podcast community. Now, you remember last year at my expo, I said, keynote, I said, don't think about money. It's not about the money. And it isn't. It's not about the money. It's about doing what you love. But if you're discouraged because it's costing you money or you're not making any money or you're not able to quit your day job, don't get discouraged. I think for a lot of us, podcasting is really going to be a very viable career.
Well, Leo, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Sure, Rob. My pleasure.
Well, folks, that concludes our interview with Leo Laporte from twit.tv. Please go over to twit.tv and check out all the really great shows that Leo has there. One thing you'll definitely know about the shows when you check them out at twit.tv is they're all hosted by people that are passionate about the subjects they're talking about. And that is so important, and they all get podcasting. Leo, thanks again for coming on the show. It was really, really great talking with you. I'm going to cut today's ending short. No feedback and no promo, but what I am going to do is say on our next show, we're going to have Jen and Carmen from Addicted to Race, and that show will go up on Wednesday the 26th. Please come back then to check us out. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this show over at iTunes. Just do a search for Podcast 411 or go to podcast411.com and subscribe to the show. As always, this is your host, Rob, from Podcast 411, reminding you to listen different.